better?
Okay, so welcome to our third edition of Marine Evenings with Marine Dynamics and Garden Conservation Trust. I know a lot of you weren't supposed to be here. You just went for a walk at the beach and you got blown in. So welcome. Welcome to the Great White House. And just two quick stories that I want to share with you. You probably saw about our sub-Antarctic seal called Teddy. It was all over the media. And he was with us for about 2 months. We picked him up in a gallus, brought him back. He was like really skinny and quite sick and just not doing well. I think he was weighing 6 kgs, 8. Yeah, the veterinarian says it was about 8. And he lived with people from Seal Rescue in Halbay, Caledon, and then went up to Babel to Dr. Greg Hoffmeyer, and he's a seal expert. And there are 4 other sub-Antarctic seals, the Tropicalis, and they're all going to be released together into the Gallus currents, and then the Gallus bank, and then they go about 200 kilometers per day, he said. So we made like a little sign that's on the crate when he's released from Marine Dynamics Garden Conservation Trust and the African Penguin and Seabird Sanctuary, saying together we are stronger at Delhi, so hopefully you would stick with them. And then another story, Saturday was African Penguin Awareness Day, and we had a very special penguin. We named her Vuka Lu, Vuka, which means close our word for rise up. And Lu was one of our interns, a French intern who looked after Vuka Lu. And Vuka Lu came in 153 days before with like a really terrible seal bite. I remember I looked at the pictures, Walker showed me pictures, and I was like, oh God, is it dead? And he was like, no, she's still alive. And Dr. Anne-Marie looked after her, and Kalani Lau, our senior bird rehabilitator. And after 153 days, it literally looked like, Dr. Anne-Marie said, it looked like the pants was pulled down. It was like completely open, the heat was exposed. It looked terrible. After 153 days, we could release this penguin on Dar Island on Saturday. You can still see the really bad, the wind. But it was so incredible to be there on the island with Vukalu in the box, and opening the box and the penguins coming closer to where we are. And Vukalu, we opened the box and she went into the water and she's like, oh my goodness, it's a salt water, this is sea water. Meaning it's like after half a year. And started to swim, and then she went directly to the penguins and they walked into the water. It was just amazing to see. So 2 amazing success stories. We've got that on our Marine Dynamics and on Diana Conservation Trust and the African Penguin and Seabird Sanctuary on social media. So please share with family and friends because it's really important for us that they know what we are doing. So we've got other people who are really passionate about ocean conservation and the marine environment. And we had them here last week. They were staying with us for 2 days. The first one I met was Nick, who's the driver, and he came in, and I was like, I think they were walking for 5 days, and he's like, I need coffee, and we need a laundry. And so, okay, where's the rest of your team? No, they're walking, and you will smell them before you see them. We'll get you sorted. So, thank you for coming back tonight, because now they're in Burley Beach, and they decided, we asked them, please can you come back for Marine Evening to tell us about the incredible work that they are doing. It started in 2018 with Mark Dixon. He's going to be the second speaker. And it started off with a group of friends, and there was a reef with discarded fishing material, and they wanted to go clean it up. And then they realized that it's a much bigger problem. And this developed into the Strandloper expedition. So the first person to tell you about this, or who's going to take the stand, is going to be Chris, who's one of the directors of the Strandloper Project. So enjoy.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Is my microphone working all right there at the back? Just hangs on my ear. Is it working at the back there? Not now. All right. Well, I'm just going to talk. If you can't hear me, let me know and I can use the other microphone. Okay, firstly, thank you to Wilfred and the team for hosting us here and also organizing this event for tonight. They did host us a couple of years ago as well when we came through this way. My job tonight is just to tell you about our first series of walks. Basically, we go out and walk about 200 to 250 kilometers a year along the coastline, and we do some research on plastic. So let me get straight into the talk and just let you know what it's all about. Okay, so as you can see, Series 1 started in 2019. It all started off, Christine almost covered my whole talk just now. Essentially, Mark started off doing some reef cleanups on Gericke's Point on a reef there. I don't know if you know Gericke's Point, it's near Sedgefield. There's a reef about 100 meters long that he went and cleared once a month. And he decided he wanted some friends to help him with this cleanup. Was that not moving? Huh. Get an IT person in here. It's moving on there, but not on. Sorry, we will get this moving shortly. So essentially, Mark was cleaning this reef and he decided he needed to get some friends along to help him do the work. So he put a WhatsApp message out and a lot of people started helping him do that work. And then essentially, what he started looking at was ghost fishing. So for those of you who don't know what ghost fishing is about, it's like if people go fishing and that's Mark on the reef. So we're getting somewhere. Yeah, but can't we get it up the whole screen? Start slide from the beginning, top left. Yeah.
I'm going to duplicate the screen. Do this.
Okay. I'm not a computer guy at all. So ghost fishing is when people go fishing on a recreational scale. So they cast out and their sinker gets caught on the reef, and essentially they can't reel it in and they break off their line, and the bait sits on the hook down there in the reef long after the guy's gone home. Fish comes along, eats the bait, it gets stuck to the reef and either dies from starvation or bigger fish comes along and chows that one, and the cycle continues. That's ghost fishing on a recreational basis. On a commercial basis with the lionfish, the lionfish is on long lines with hooks every 1.5 to 2 meters. Sometimes those snag on the bottom, they get cut off, and they carry on fishing well after the people have gone away.
Click for the next slide.
Click for the next slide. Okay, so that's Mark underwater cleaning the reef initially. That's Mark above the water, just so you know what he looks like when he comes to talk to us now. So as I said, you got a small group of people together, and we started going once a month cleaning up the reef. And this is just 1 month's haul on the reef. So it gives you an idea. It's a nice place to fish. Maybe the guys aren't so good at fishing at that part of the world, but that's what happens. Then he decided, okay, to bring the attention to ghost fishing, we're going to do a walk along the coastline, an expedition from Blombos, near Stilbaai, all the way back to Wilderness where we live, which is near 230 kilometers. I put my hand up, said, cool, that sounds like fun. This is what I thought we'd be doing. We'd do some surveys along the way and do some snorkeling and things like that. Turned out that we actually had to walk a long way. And we had to do a lot of research while we were doing it. So as you can see, this is the very first expedition in 2019. We started off down in Blombos, and the colors vary according to the days that we walked. It gives you a bit of an idea of the distance that we covered. On paper, it was 175 kilometers. There was a crow that Mark said, as the crows flies, it's 5 kilometers today. And then once you walk in and out of all the gullies, it's 15 kilometers. So in the end, it turned out to be a 210 kilometer hike the first year. As I said, we started off at Blombos. This is the Oor, for those of you who know it. We walked from sunrise on most days, where we would often be on the beach doing our first survey. We walked many, many footsteps along the way, sometimes in pouring rain, pretty much every trip we have, there's some kind of storm. We had a bit of a windstorm today. Luckily, we decided to walk in this direction, so we started Rietfontein to Didam. We've just blown along the whole way today. You guys really have wind around here, don't you? Sometimes we have to negotiate cliffs. Sometimes we have to negotiate cliffs in the rain, just to make them a little bit more difficult. And we often walk right through to sunset. Luckily, as you heard, we get a bit smelly from walking so long, so we were able to finish earlier today and have a shower, so we didn't have to walk all the way to sunset today. So these were the expedition objectives for our first expedition, and we pretty much stick to them. Some things have changed slightly, but it's really, the initial one was to bring attention to the work we were doing on the reef and the problems of ghost fishing. But very early on in fact, on our very first expedition, we had a marine biologist with us who wanted to do some research on plastic pollution along the coastline. And so, right from the start, as we hit the beach at Blombos, we did some surveys, and I'm just going to show you some information from the surveys just now. But essentially, we take a 10-meter line, and then 1 meter either side of that line, we pick up every single piece of plastic that we can find, even if it's microplastics or nurdles and that, and we pick those up as much as we can see. And then we count it, we categorize it and count it. And we do 3 of those transects every 5 kilometers. So what happens is you end up with 60 square meters. It's not, I mean, it's quite random where you are on that spot, but we decided on a 5 kilometer mark so we wouldn't go, oh, we're at the 5 kilometer point here. Looks a bit messy and I'm tired. I don't feel like counting all this plastic, or other way around. It's really clean. This is where I want to be, you know. So we have 5 kilometer marks. And now over the last 5 years, we've walked 1,000 kilometers. The 5 years that I'm covering here, we did Hermanus to Gericke, Port Elizabeth. But this year, we started actually in Pringle Bay. So we've extended it a little bit further. This is a survey in progress. This is actually the very first survey that we... And then there you see we start categorizing the different findings that we have. These are, you'll see other photographs of some of the survey sites and what we find. You'll notice that one on the bottom left there is a lot of cigarette butts. That's Victoria Bay. A lot of people go to the beach there, throw the cigarette butts, and that's what we find at that particular point. And then we use an app called Cyber Tracker. These are 4 screens, so you move from one screen to the next to the next. This is actually quite an old slide, but it just gives you an idea of how it works. Your name's there, so it shows you who's capturing it. We've got different categories for, you know, if it's fauna or the plastic. The one's got a dirty dozens, the dirty dozen column, that's for our transects, but it's actually become a trashy 20 because you get there's about 20 items that we find reoccur over and over again. Okay, and then I'm just going to run through what we've covered, just so you can see some of the scenery that we've been through. Like I said, the first 5 years covered Hermanus to Gericke. So this, some of you might recognize as Walker Bay on the way to De Kelders. And then the beautiful seas of De Kelders. What we have found in the first year that we walked that, which was 2 years ago, and again this year, one of the things which is coming to the fore is when we first started this, we thought a lot of the plastic that was washing up on the beach was coming from ships out at sea. But as the years go past, we've realized that most of it's washing out of municipal areas. And what we're finding, and it's been reinforced on this particular trip, a lot of the plastic is on the western side of the points that stick out along here. And we believe that it's coming out of False Bay, and the prevailing inshore currents and winds are blowing it onto the western side of the points, and you often have less plastic on the eastern side of the points. So certainly here on this beach, not the one in the foreground, but in the dunes there in Walker Bay, you see a lot of plastic getting washed up onto the sand there and then being blown into the dunes towards Stanford. These are some of the pictures along the way, looking at the Kelders. Then we go through Agulhas National Park. We're going to tackle that tomorrow. Hopefully the wind will die down a little bit, otherwise we might be back here tomorrow evening. Some of the fish traps that you find along the way around Cape Agulhas. Arniston, Varneskrans. If anyone's got connections at Denell, we're still trying to get through there. Talk to us afterwards. The Hoop Nature Reserve, we've been through that. We helped out on the whale trail run, and then during that time we were able to walk along the whale trail and do some surveys along there, which was interesting, and certainly got the wave from the whale. You guys are probably all used to this kind of photography. You probably all take photographs from your cell phone like this every day. And often the tides obviously play a big role for us. If you hit some places at low tide, you have nice rock shelves. Other times you can be pushed right up against the cliff. So it's quite important to look where you're walking each day. And certainly sometimes the cliffs are big and you've got to go up and over the top. On the whale trail it's nice, there's pathways along the top, but there certainly are places, for example, east of the whale trail before Cape Infanta, there's quite a lot of rough cliffs up there without any paths. Okay, that's the Breede River mouth. On the other side of the Breede River mouth, this was really beautiful at low tide, but at high tide it became quite tricky. So the tide's starting to come in. And this is the Davenox River, that's the one. Sorry, I keep forgetting the name. We hit that at high tide, and there was quite a rough sea right at the mouth. So we decided to come right into this corner to swim across the river. And by the time we got to the other side, we were like out of this shot. It was probably the longest swim that we've had to do. And that's what high tide looks like for us often. Sometimes you have to go right up onto the dunes. And however, one of the things that people also, when we talk to them about plastic pollution on the coastline, they say, oh, but we walk on the beach every day. We don't see plastic on the beach. That's often because people walk when it's a spring low tide, when the sand is nice and hard down near the waves there. Just take time to walk up where the high water mark is. That's where all the plastic's sitting. It gets washed up there. So we spend many kilometers walking in soft sand up at the high water mark. These are around Stilbaai, some of the fish traps. And then you get to some big cliffs that you really have to time your tides right. Luckily, sometimes there's an escape route, and certainly this escape route we did have to go up. I believe that staircase has now fallen down. It was a little bit like being Indiana Jones in one of those old movies. Get up before the staircase falls down. But we were rewarded with a beautiful view from up top there, looking back towards Stilbaai. So it's the Eystervarkpunt Lighthouse. And then we went through some little caves as you start nearing George, the Great Brack area. The Guang River mouth became a bit of an obstacle for us. It was quite a difficult climb down over there because I forgot to take the rope. They blame me for it, still to this day. But we made it down, and most of us made it down. One person went back up again. And then beautiful this is home to us, Sagefield, so we're used to walking along these beaches along there. There's George and Craddock Peak in the background. This was during COVID that we did this section. Actually, that year we walked from Nature's Valley back to Wilderness. And then Mark and I were lucky enough to also get onto the Otter Trail, which was closed at the time, and we were able to walk that section. And And this is on the western heads of Knysna Heads. So we've been very lucky that a lot of landowners who have land going down to the sea, or onto sea cliffs and that, have led us onto their properties to do some research. So this was on the western heads, looking back towards Buffalo Bay. And we had, that year we had the Featherbed Nature Reserve to ourselves, which was wonderful walking through there. However, beyond Knysna, those cliffs become really treacherous. You start moving towards the Tsitsikamma area. These cliffs here are between Knysna or Nutsi and Plettenberg Bay. We first did a scout, a friend of mine had an aeroplane. He took me for a flight just to look at it, see how we could get around some of these headlands. And certainly it was a tricky walk. There is a hike, the old Harkeville Trail, is it, that goes down there, but it had been damaged in a fire, so we had quite a tricky trip along there, and certainly sometimes we were hanging onto the cliffs with quite big waves crashing below us. One slip and you'd be washed out to sea. Sometimes you had to jump across rocks and just make sure that your timing was correct before the next big swell came in and washed you into a gully and then out to sea. And you can see why we can't stick right down to the water level the whole time. Certainly that area, it's up 300 meters of cliff, and then it's down, and then it's along a bit, then up again and down a bit. And what we do there, if we are up on top of a cliff when the 5 kilometer mark comes up, then we find the next place that we can get down to the sea, and we go do our surveys down there. Often a survey down on rocks doesn't show you the plastic so as well as you can find it on the beach, because often plastics goes down in between the rocks and it's hard to really establish what's there. But it's really magnificent scenery down on the Robberg Coastal Corridor. This is all getting towards Robberg in Plettenberg Bay. And then we crossed the Cuboms River and walked along the Cuboms Strand through towards Nature's Valley. This is a really beautiful, there's a tunnel over here. You see there's two black, it looks like caves there. The lower one is a tunnel that you go into, and you've got to hit it at low tide because you pop out the other side where waves are crashing, and you're kind of waist deep in crashing waves when you pop out. So you go right through the middle of this headland and you come out on the far side of it there. That's what the far end of the tunnel looks like. And then that's on the Otter Trail. That's the trip that Mark and I did on the Otter Trail. I mean, it was so closed up we had to put tents up on the verandas of the huts. That's how high the Blowkrans was. We actually had to have an afternoon snooze for about 2 hours waiting for the tide to go out. And it's nice to walk along there, but you're not down near the ocean enough. The trails are always up top. Then we crossed the Storms River mouth, and then you're onto the Dolphin Trail, which was also nice. There you can see it also up top. So you spend a lot of time trying to work your way down to the rocks at the bottom to find a place where you can do your surveys. And then you get onto long beaches that take you on towards Queberge. The longest one being from Jeffreys Bay to Maitland Beach. I think it's about 42 kilometers of beach sand. And that gets you through to Cape Recife Lighthouse, where that's the furthest east that we've been. I've just got a couple of slides from this year's trip, just because, like I said, the slideshow was going to be from Hermanus to Queberge, but we did push on a little bit and started at Pringle Bay, went around Hunklip on day 1 to Betty's Bay. And then this is going across towards Horston. Some really beautiful flowers. And that just brings me onto just some of the things that we want to bring attention to. Obviously, the original task was to bring attention to ghost fishing, which I have explained to you about. These are just some of the places where we've done some dives and pulled out monofilament. This is monofilament that washes up on the beach. This was around Strandloper, I think. In 100 meters of beach, we found that. That's because it gets caught in the kelp and then it just gets broken off and turned around and pushed up on the beach. And certainly, you know, when we come through Betty's Bay the other day, we saw some fishermen finishing on the beach, going home, and the gull went down and picked up something. And we watched it fly off, and it ate the bait. And the next thing, it flew off, and there's a hook hanging out here, and the rest of the monofilament was down its throat. So unfortunately, we couldn't get to it. So we have done autopsies on some animals while we've been walking along. Here, certainly, this one was an entanglement, and unfortunately passed away from it. This is us just doing some reef cleaning, and the result of some of the problems that we have seen from ghost fishing. Then, of course, there's debris which washes up from the ships, which I have spoken about a little bit, but a lot of the stuff is coming out of municipal areas. Bottles are a huge, big problem. As I say, originally we thought they were coming off ships, but we certainly have found that a lot of it's coming out of municipal catchment areas. Sometimes you find 100 bottles in a matter of 20 meters. Here you can see a whole lot. That's a gully. There's a gully just off out of picture here, and it obviously just catches and just blows it up into the bushes there. This is just on the it's getting down towards Danger Point there. This is the kind of stuff that we believe is washing out of Cape Town and then getting caught on the points. This photograph was taken yesterday. This is going down to Coin Point. Again, same kind of problem, getting washed up on the shoreline. And then those big crates and things, they break down into microplastics. So we do try and do counts along there. This particular picture, you will see things like earbuds and lollipop sticks, which we've got someone here, if you want to have a look later, the lollipop sticks that I've got in this container we picked up in half a day yesterday. That's half a day. This is about 3/4 of it. Well, this is Mark's one. This is half a day yesterday as well. This is fire lighters from, not fire light, yeah, lighters, fire light, cigarette lighters, not fire lighters. So we don't pick up all the rubbish that we'd still be like 1 meter into like our first hike if we had to pick up all our rubbish, but we do collect some things along the way to just, to show people. And this is kind of where it all comes from. This is actually in the George municipal area. That's the kind of plastic that gets washed down the rivers, you know. So a lot of it is actually just trying to get the information to municipalities and authorities and say, look, you've got to start looking at the way that you are managing all the rubbish that you guys are collecting or not collecting. Certainly in this area you find these are condom packets. You know, unfortunately, if we can get people to learn that if they protect the ocean from which they make a living, then maybe we can convince them not to do that, but let's hope. These are nurdles. I'm sure you all know about nurdles. There are some nurdles over here that are primary microplastics. So basically, if someone wants to make something out of plastic, if they've got a big lump of plastic, to melt it down takes too much energy. So it's much better to have fine little bits of plastic. So I do have a bag of nurdles over here. They look like little, tiny little eggs. And every now and again, containers get washed overboard, and these things pop up out of the sea in big bags, and then the bags break and they get washed up onto the beach in their hundreds of thousands. So the one year there was a big nurdle spill just as we started our walk, and we started reporting on it, and about 2 weeks later it started washing up around in this area. And by then we had already worked out a way that we were going to count them, which was by creating a 35 by 35 centimeter square, and then counting all the nurdles in that square. And the most that we got just out of a random area was 1,587. And just to give you an idea of what a nurdle problem looks like, this is in October 2017 when 2 containers were lost overboard. As you can see, just each container had 990 bags, 25 kilogram bags in per container. You can see all the math there, but if you look at it, there's 545 million nurdles were lost at sea and washed up on the shoreline somewhere. And then in Plettenberg Bay in 2020, there were 3 times as much that got washed up. So it gives you an idea of the problem. And certainly we have done some dissections and found nurdles in animal stomachs. We're not saying it's necessarily killed them, but certainly could make them feel full or give them other problems. So we do some research on fauna as we go along as well. We do capture data on that as well. And then certainly we take time to talk to people who are willing to listen to us, like yourselves. Schools come along and join us and maybe do beach cleanups. Conservancies come along and join us. So we do try and get the word out there. Certainly we couldn't get it right without our sponsors. And every expedition we have different sponsors. Some of it is for accommodation. Some of it, certainly we have had Halfway Toyota sponsors us vehicles every year. And Quick Spa has sponsored food. So we certainly are thankful to our sponsors. Without them, we wouldn't be leaping ahead into the future, being warriors for the environment. Oops, I've jumped too far ahead. I'm too scared to go back now. No, shouldn't have pushed that. Previous. And yeah, so we're doing our best for the wildlife out in the ocean. And that's really all I've got to say. The more technical stuff, I'm going to hand over to Mark to talk to you about that. But just to say thank you for coming here and supporting us. And please do follow us on Facebook and Instagram and our social media. And as we grow, we have started an NPO in the last couple of years, and it certainly is growing dramatically at the moment. So yeah, please do follow us and keep abreast of what we're up to. I'll hand over to Mark.
Thank you, Chris.
Get that as close to your mic.
Okay, I've just got to change the format here. Okay, so I'm going to, I feel exhausted just watching that 1,000 kilometers again. We have to date just gone 192 kilometers over the last, since we started on the 5th. And we've seen quite a lot of change. But I'm just going to share with you some of the data that we collect of things along the way. But I think, first of all, I've got to say thanks to one of our sponsors, but just an incredible team. You know, we always have 6 hikers, and it's very important because, you know, you're concentrating from sunset to, sunrise to sunset. You're looking at your screen, so this is not a digital detox. This is actually just overload on digital, and we're capturing data non-stop. So you'll see it of the photos that Chris showed. People are just looking at their screens all the time. And that's how dedicated everybody is to capture this. It's always amazing. We're all volunteers. We take time out of our day jobs and to go for a 200 kilometer or more hike. So just want to say thanks to that, everybody. And I'm going to now, this just gives you a map of what we've done over the last 5 years. So we did 960 kilometers in our first series, and we've hiked all the way Cape Recife to Grotto Beach in different stages. There's one or two gaps there, and the one particular gap that we're trying to close is from Korpialeon through to Arniston. So the Nell, we've tried for 3 years, and we just haven't had any luck getting permission to go through there. We have snuck in there, and we know there's a lot of trash, so it becomes very important to go in there. But when we have a look at what we've managed to do, we now call it the Trashy 20 survey. We've done in the last 5 years, over 174 Trashy 20 surveys. Some of them can be as quick as 2 minutes. Some of them can take 90 minutes just to survey 20 square meters, depending on what the plastic load is. Chris has highlighted the adventures, and crossing the Davenhawks, I think, was one of our biggest adventures. We've had a couple of cliff-hanging experiences, but Melinda was convinced when we were crossing the Davenhawks that all the bull sharks were going to come out of the Breda River, swim up the coast, and then come in there. And we swam 1.6 kilometers, and she was convinced. She stuck to me like a limpet. She was convinced that we had bull sharks underneath us. Anyway, and I couldn't convince her any other way. But so we've had a lot of fun. But the nitty-gritty is our survey. So we surveying primarily for plastic. The objective was to try and survey for ghost fishing and recreational impact on that. Just quickly on that, we've documented 12 species of fish that have been killed by recreational fishing, ghost fishing. We're the first people in the world to do any studies on ghost fishing in recreational fishing. Most of those species of fish are sharks and rays. And a lot of them are the small species, so your puff adders, shire sharks, and your cat sharks, which are all endemic species. But we've also had within that, we've had 7 species of birds dying that we've documented from entanglements from monofilament. So it's quite important to realize that. But that's what you can see what we're doing all the time. We're crouching down, counting plastic, and as you can see, some of them have lots of plastic, some of them don't. It depends on the substrate that we're on. We do a lot of incidental sightings, so between the 5 kilometer marks, we document whatever we've seen as well, so it's a huge amount of data. Last year, we had over 8,900 records that we recorded along just of plastic on our expedition. So it's a huge amount of data to wade through. And then we do mini transects. So we may have hit a spot at 5 kilometers like we did today. Not a lot of plastic, maybe 5 pieces. That's like a 90-second survey. And you walk 100 meters and there's a blowout of microplastics. And then you start doing mini transects, which then take you another 20 minutes just to count all the plastic. So we are covering it. We're trying to work out where the densities are and the distribution of the plastics as we go along. So basically set up 10 meters by 2 meter transects, 3 of them just for statistical variation, counting what we can. Microplastics are something that a lot of people don't realize just how much we've got on the beach, and that's all over the place. Nurdles, it's something that we also document quite extensively, and then the items. So the Trashy 20 it's a modification of the Dirty Dozen. We've looked at what we've collected over the first 3 years and recorded, and we saw what were the 20 most common items. And they're all domestic items with a couple of fishing related items, and that's recreational fishing related items. And so we added that. So we categorize our plastic and we record that. And then obviously if we find things that aren't in the top 20, we'll record them as well. but it's just to have a good idea of the distribution along the coastline. And even in here, we're on day 10, 9 of the stages that we've done have had different primary items that we've documented every day. So Pringle Bay was sucker stick city of note. And then we go literally along this coastline here, and it's monofilament of note. So that bottle that we filled there, that was in less than 5 kilometers. So it's squeaky clean for the other plastic, everyone's cleaning up that, but the monofilament's all over the place. So, you know, there's different types of debris in different types of places. And it's just understanding that and the drift mechanisms that dirty the beaches is what these Trashy 20 surveys are all about. So that's where we've done them. Once again, you can see the glaring gap in our data is at the null area. But this is the photo that you see in there is of us. I think this was on the Horston Beach, if I remember correctly. But yeah, we're on our knees looking at bits of plastic for a lot of the time. And when we're not on our knees, then we just like got our heads down and capturing plastic. We've got a technique that we sort of leapfrog. Person in front sees something, they draw a line. They're busy capturing that. The next one comes along, goes, sees something, starts capturing, draws the line so that we don't duplicate what gets captured. Plastic bottles, Chris mentioned that. On our first expedition, we didn't even consider the extent of plastic bottles. So we didn't have a special category. And after the first day, had to go back onto the computer and redesign and add that onto our app because the plastic of bottles was so high. And the tragedy is that's a high value product. I've met people that are collecting a ton, they're not even working for anyone, unemployed, collecting a ton of bottles per week, so 4 tons a month. They're getting 4,500 Rand a ton. That's just under 20,000 Rand that they're earning, and that's an unemployed person. Just taking the initiative to do that. It's a high value, and it's something that I'll talk about and address it a little bit later. But it is uniform along the coastline. There are some areas that are higher density, so sadly this is one of the areas that's got a lot of plastic bottles. Then just from Breda River through to Blombos, the little blue dots there, so east of Cape Infanta, massive amounts of bottles washing up there. And then just west of Cape St. Francis, huge amounts of plastic bottles washing up there. Not to say that there's not a lot in the other places, there's a lot. And you just have to go into the rivers after a heavy rain and just see what's there, what's flushing out of that. So yes, there are some coming from the boats, but trust me, the bulk of it is coming from inland, and it's just mismanagement of our solid waste throughout the country. And it's a tragedy. Some of the municipalities get their green noddy badges every year on their audit about how they manage their solid waste. And unfortunately, some of those municipalities are the ones that we've earmarked as being the worst municipalities in the 1,000 kilometers that we've hiked. So going with plastic bottles or plastic lids, and it's got to be the #1 item along the coastline that we have documented. And we literally fill up bottles of these things. Probably the worst was between Tsitsikamma and St. Francis. We were filling up 2 to 3 bottles with these lids every day. A phenomenal amount. Also a high value plastic, and why that's getting lost to the system has to be investigated. Europe has now come out, you cannot take that lid off your bottle. You can screw it off and drink, but you can't separate it because it's a problem. So it's not an African problem, it's not a South African problem, it's an international problem. And the EU has addressed that by modifying their design. Once again, here we go, distribution of plastic lids. The Blombos area, phenomenal amount there, as I say, around Cape Recife. So the numbers don't represent densities, so this isn't a heat map, but this is just where we've documented these. And so where there's gaps, those are rocky beaches where they've gone in between the rocks, and we can't get a good record of that. It's fantastic when they're on sandy beaches. This is just from now, so we've filled up 2 of these bottles in the last 2 days, and it's just tragic to go through and have the high densities of those. Nurdles, Chris touched on that, and they are a danger. Most of the turtles that get rescued here along the Western Cape coastline have microplastics and nurdles in their intestine. One of the records in 2 oceans, a 25-gram turtle, that's its live weight, had 14 grams of microplastics in it. So it just gives you an idea of how much they're eating, and so basically they think their stomach's full, so they don't eat. So these turtles, when they come in, they're undernourished and they're weak. They usually get, when we have stormy conditions like this is when they sort of get stranded, and it happens to birds as well. So you have that simulation of a full stomach, so they don't eat, and they lose condition very, very quickly. But you also have from nurdles and microplastics is that the digestive enzymes can release chemicals, and some of the chemicals of that plastic can be toxic. And then the other thing is it's a great substrate for microorganisms, of which some can be pathogenic. So an animal can get an infection from that as well. And then the worst one, and they see that with a couple of specimens at 2 oceans, is it actually lacerates the digestive tract. If the part's got a sharp edge to it or corner, and that will then affect digestion in the animal, and also then potential infection, which could be fatal for them. So not a great thing. What we have found with the nurdle spills, massive amounts from 2020, but I want you to look at the yellow dots there between Still Bay and Mossel Bay. We recorded high densities there. That was 2019. That was before the spill. We have got a loss of nurdles into our oceans that is continuous. We've been recording now, we've had from 6 nurdles per meter to 160 nurdles per meter along this coastline. Even today we had 114 nurdles per meter. There's industries that are using this. Their mechanism of cleaning up at the end of the day is just to flush it down or sweep it out, and it goes into the municipal systems and gets washed out either through infrastructure or through rivers or both. And so that's something that we want to try and find out more. What are the requirements with companies producing plastic, and how do they manage their spilt nurdles on the floor? And I've been to some of these factories, and they're going to fall out. There's just static electricity is going to influence how they get lost. But you've all seen spill tech along your beaches, okay? And I know can be some controversy. We've had some controversy with how they've done their nurdle cleanup between 2020 and last year. 176 tons of nurdles were lost at sea in 2020. They have recovered 120 tons. That's a phenomenal amount, but it still means there's a phenomenal amount sitting out there on our beaches and in the ocean, and that getting consumed by animals and that. And I just think it's a saving grace that when our southern rights come here, they're not feeding during their breeding season, because they would be gulping these down, and 20 to 30 kilograms of plastic can kill a humpback whale. So you can just imagine a big gulp of a whole lot of nurdles. That could be quite a lethal concoction for our wildlife here. Microplastics. This is the one that most people walk past, don't have a clue. We do a lot of talks to international tourists, ironically, and they come and they just don't, they say, oh, this beach is wonderful, wunderbar, it looks like really nice and clean. And then you say, okay, just come do a Trashy 20 survey, and it's suddenly very different. And, I'm always hesitant when we do those tours, if you want to call it, and they get, these foreigners really get into it here. I don't know who's the international person here. Yes, yeah. Thank you. No, but it's quite amazing, and it's that realization that it's not the plastic packet, it's not the shopping bag, it's not all of those other things. It's these small little items that are in the system and washing up and having an impact. And you've got to look hard for them, but once you've seen them, you can never unsee it again. You'll never go back onto the beach and be able to walk past without wanting to clean something up. Once again, microplastics. We've had some big washouts on this expedition. So the Horston Beach, horrendous there. Today we had 3 or 4 big blowouts from Rietfontein to De Dam. Yesterday we had a massive one on approaching Queen Point. So it's there, it's constantly happening. And this is coming out of municipal infrastructure. It's getting broken down and then flushing out either through the sewage works or through other municipal infrastructure and getting into the rivers. And it's stemming the flow at source that's absolutely crucial for communities along the coastline to address. Very high densities around about Cape St. Francis as well, Cape Recife. We've had high densities, the Coco River, and then Breda River, Blombos, it's amazing. I think you can start a plastic factory just by collecting the stuff off the beach there. It's so dense. So it is along our entire coastline, and it has to be addressed collectively through provincial government as well as regional municipalities and that. Okay, so this is microplastics. The picture on your right is one of our Trashy 20 surveys. You can see that because we've got the little sucker sticks and the earbuds all in a pretty pattern. You can see the different colors separated in the microplastics. The other one, sadly, is a Spiltec midden, as we call them. So Spiltec, when they were collecting the nurdles, they would collect all the microplastics, they'd sieve it out of the sand, and then they would spend hours picking out 30 or 40 nurdles out of that, and then they would just dump the plastic down. They claim to have recovered 8 tons of plastic in the 3 years. We have just seen a whole lot of these, what we call nurdle middens, where they've just dumped the plastic. And yesterday, we went past legacy nurdle middens from about 2021 on the way to Queen Point. So it's still out there, that plastic's just remaining. And that's the sad reality of microplastics. But if you know what you're looking for, it stands out like a highlighter. Squid jigs. Interestingly enough, so who doesn't know what a squid jig is? Okay, squid jig is that little, or that green thing up there, just over 10 centimeters long, a lot of very sharp stainless steel barbs on it, and it's used for catching chokka or squid. And basically, you fish at night, that thing glows in the dark. It's on a hand line, goes down, and then when the squid grabs it, you just pull it up, it hangs on. Doesn't sort of really get stuck on there, but and then as you flick it up over your shoulder, when you get to the boat, it realizes in the air, it releases, lands in the boat, and then you throw your squid jig back in and catch the next one. What's amazing is just how many we see getting washed up. Okay, so we're going to have to change this map. We're seeing more in the last 10 days. We've documented a lot more. So we only had 2 cases in 2021 along this section. But obviously everyone knows that the chokka industry is at Cape St. Francis and J-Bay. And so you see a lot of them there. But they're becoming more and more universal the more west you go. So that's quite an interesting one. I chatted to an old skipper of a chocker boat, and I said, why are they losing so many? Because, I mean, there's literally, like, hundreds of kilograms that we've documented. And he says it's the swivel. The guys are saving a 3 or 4 rand on getting an inferior quality swivel that perishes because of the salt water, just to save a couple of rands. But then they're losing the whole squid jig in that. If your dog eats one of these when it's on the beach, you've got a very expensive veterinary bill if you don't lose your dog. I can just imagine marine life, thinking of dolphins, seals, and all of that sort of thing, consuming this, and that would not be a nice way for it to live. In fact, I know the rabies has been confirmed now in the Cape fur seal populations, but we had one incident in Plett last year, and it had monofilament coming out, and they suspect that they could never catch that one, but the suspicion was that that particular seal had a squid jig down its throat, and it was just the reason it attacked 3 people, that particular seal, and they reckon it was just in pain, and that was, it must have seen the person associated with the jig and was just taking it out on people. But yeah, if we could somehow get that industry tidied up so that we don't lose as many squid jigs, that would be fantastic. What this also shows is that the use of the Titicaca MPA is a focus area, the buffer zone around the Titicaca MPA for the squid fishery, and especially when you take the drift of the current taking plastic along the coastline there. Crab pots, huge issue in terms of ghost fishing. When they get lost, they stay down there, they've got bait in, organisms go in, marine wildlife go in there, they can't get out, they die, they then become bait, something else goes in, and it carries on like that. In Canada, they reckon 40% of all deployed crab pots per year are lost. And the numbers on what's happening in terms of the loss of marine life going into those pots is also exceptionally high, and they always calculate it into dollar terms, not into the loss of life. But once again, this area, you've got a fair amount of crab pots washing up, a fair, quite a big loss. We had, with this wind, quite a few had blown up today, just alone. But we've documented along the coastline in this area in 2021, and we've already documented quite a few now this year. And the highest density per kilometre is in the Hermanus Marine Protected Area, which is between Wilderness and Knysna. But the highest number is at just before, so once again, between Titicaca and Cape Recife, Cape St. Francis. So that was the incredible number of crab pots that we documented along that section of coastline. And this is the value of doing these expeditions. You start seeing where things are occurring so that you can go and address it locally. This here, these are photos from just around the corner. And I'm sorry to say, this has got to be monofilament nightmare in terms of, so that picture of Chris there, that's at, say, the Strand. And we just cannot believe the amount of monofilament that washes up along this coastline. It's the number 1 place along the 1,000 kilometers is here in this area. And sadly, everybody wants to fish in the kelp. You just have to be out over the weekend, as we were, and just see everybody that's got a fishing rods out there, driving their buckies on the beach. And I don't know what's happened in this part of the Western Cape, but I thought you weren't allowed to drive on the beach. But it's very different down here. And it gets caught in the kelp, or the fish swims around the kelp, and you just get masses and mats of this around a kelp, and any fish that's stuck on that will die. If there's still a baited hook, they're going to take it and die. And sadly, it's our endemic little shark species that are the primary victims. The most number of ghost fishing fatalities that we've documented along our expeditions are once again between Arniston and Grotto Beach. So it's a harsh reality here in terms of what's happening to the sharks. And I know everyone's worried about the big sharks, but you've got to look after the baby sharks as well. Yeah, once again, distribution, huge amount, and the highest density. You can see the numbers there in our 2021 expedition, red dots, and that's your neck of the woods. And so, yeah, I don't know how to address that, but it needs a behavior modification of fishermen to try and reduce the loss of monofilament. I'm sure the guys at the fishing shops are loving it, but it's not good for the environment, sadly. Okay, so what are the risks of plastic pollution? You know, we know where the plastic pollution is occurring. So the average consumption of a European, so that, you know, in Europe, is over 53 credit cards, the equivalent in weight of microplastics. So they are eating the equivalent of 1 credit card per year in weight. They are inhaling the equivalent of 1 credit card per week. Okay? So when you're using your vacuum cleaner, when you've got a jacket that's made out of plastic like this one and you rub it and those little fibers go up, that's the inhalation. We're now finding microplastics in our brain, and for the men, and you get it in other parts, but I've put the testes here on purpose because if you grab somebody by, then they take more notice of things. But this is what's happening, and we're even finding that the literature is suggesting that cholesterol clots are around a nucleus of microplastics in your system. So you've got, as you hear, you've got microplastics in your system from what you're consuming. I can't compare that with Europe because no one's done the research with what's happening here in Africa. It's probably going to be quite a bit higher just because of the amount of plastic that we do use for our wrapping and everything like that. So that's the direct impact on us as humans, as consumers, utilizing plastic and being exposed to it. I went into about the ingestion and how it emulates a full stomach. It can disrupt the feeding behavior, the physical damage to the digestive tract, and then also possible pathogenic microorganisms and the chemical release that could be toxic. So that's the risk of what we have with all this plastic that's going on. And the smaller it gets, the more chance it is that you are going to be consuming it and having health hazards from that at some point in our lives. How do you reduce the flow into that? So this is quite an interesting one. And this is just a very short summary, but basically you've got to identify your culprit infrastructure that's losing that. And, you know, Hermanus is, I know Brenda did a lot of work trying to get capture nets and all that. You're capturing the big stuff, not the small stuff. And the technology that's required and infrastructure that's required to stop the microplastics has to be looked at, and so the engineers have to put their heads together there. But you've also got to look at your municipal services collecting solid waste. And we've seen it in George is that in a wealthy neighborhood, your service truck will go in and collect from, let's say, 10 blocks. When they go into the low-income neighborhood, they go the same schedule is done for the 10 blocks in the low-income neighborhoods. But sadly, the population is 10 to 15 times denser. So they're not taking all the trash away. And it's fascinating when you go in there and you see there's a whole industry around that. So you'll get a really poor guy walking around with a black plastic bag, and he'll go up to a house, and they'll come and they'll bring the trash, they'll fill up his bag, they'll give him between 2 and 5 rand, and he'll go, and when the bag's full, he'll just go and dump it at the bottom of the road. And then he comes back along. So they're cleaning up, okay? And I know that there's a lot of bias, ethnic bias, on what happens in certain neighborhoods, but municipal services is something that has to be changed to get with that. We've got to look at different technologies to use plastic as a resource. We can produce electricity from plastic. We can produce diesel from plastic. So imagine a municipality that produces diesel from plastic, sending fuel in their trucks to go fetch the plastic, to come and produce diesel, to send the trucks to go and do that. They don't need a landfill. Can you imagine just how that would help alleviate the situation? We've got to look at how can we get into the an individual can make 20,000 Rand a month. The person she sells to will be making over 580,000 Rand a month. And the person that one's selling to is making over 2 million Rand per month. Okay, that's gross, but that's the income stream just in 3 stages of collecting plastic. And we need to have more of a business mind in getting involved in that and opening that up to unemployment, which we've got in this country, and opening up those revenue streams, utilizing what is a problem, and rather let's look at it as a resource within society. And that's not only a problem that's faced here, it's faced around the world. Asia's a lot worse than we are. We have to modify our personal plastic consumption patterns, and we've got to lead by example. I like to think that going down the beach, learning, we're knocking off a couple of these points, we're trying to apply our minds, how we can also solve a lot of issues, and collaborating with people that have some of the engineering technology. And I like to think that by going down the beach and doing our expeditions, we are leading by example. Okay, so that's plastic. I can see there's a lot more silence here than when Chris was talking, so it's a heavy topic, and so some good news, and this was the one I love. This is why I walk down the beach. Okay, so strandlopers. We've been watching the African oyster catchers, or black oyster catchers. We didn't have our data. We were looking for dead birds. We wanted to see what was being killed, and we documented a whole lot of dead birds, so we never recorded live birds for our first expedition. But we've documented every bird that we've seen for the last 5 years, plus these 10 days. And we've documented 1,801 oyster catches, which is quite interesting. And we've got a couple of gaps. Once again, Infanta's a big gap, and if we take a closer look to this area, you'll see that between Grotto Beach and Horston, in the Walker Bay, there's a big gap there. You'll see a couple of gaps just going from here towards Purley Beach, some gaps there. And then you'll see, we haven't been there yet, but from the dump towards Osfontein, some gaps there. Those 3 gaps are where vehicles are on beaches. Okay, people driving on beaches, those are where we don't have the birds. And that was the situation in 2021. Here's the good news. Okay, so we documented 669 oyster catches in 2021 along our expedition from Grotto through to Arniston. If we zoom into your area, this is this year. I like to tell you that we have filled the gap in there. So in this section here, in 2021, we documented 490 oyster catches. I haven't included today's results because we just got off the beach, had a shower and came here, but we've to date documented 743 oyster catches. But sadly, we still got the gap between Elands, Kraal, Rivier, and about 3.6 kilometers down the beach. Okay, let me tell you, it was a blinking highway there on the day we were walking. And Guys might like their fishing, they don't want to walk the 3.6 kilometers, I get it. But, you know, you are denting a species survival. There's a couple of factors. It would need a lot more research. I've got a couple ideas why I think that we're getting such high numbers now. And I think it's to do with your very wet year last year and this year. I think it's the winter storms, the kelp washing up. But what is interesting on that Horston beach, and food resources is one of the criteria for the density of oyster catches along the coastline, is that we had an unprecedented amount of white mussels and sand mussels washed up on that shoreline. And it's thick. Those shell beds are thick there. We saw the poachers busy digging them out and all that sort of stuff, but their food resource is there. So it's a good news story. You've got a nice, stable base, and the population of oyster catchers from 2021 has exceeded, in the first 10 days, what we did. And I'm just taking, not even 10 days, this is just that stage. I haven't even kept what we counted from Pringle Bay. So we're over the 1,000 birds by the time we finish this expedition. And that is phenomenal. So that's the good news. If you want to follow us and you know how to use a QR code, you can scan that. Otherwise, you can go look up our social media and all of that. And I just want to say thank you. I know we've taken a bit more time than we should have, but I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you've learned something. And I just want to say thank you very much to Christine for organizing this, for us to be here, for Wilfred for making it possible, and for you for all coming out, and to my team for assisting with this. Thank you.
Before you go back to that QR code.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm just going to take this off you, because you talk a lot.
Not more than Chris.
Well, that's the way to go. Thank you so much, Mark. So, have you got that QR code?
Yeah.
So, I just want everybody to see the QR code, so you can scan it to support these guys, because I think it's really incredible what they're doing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the amazing research. So I had a conversation with Mark earlier, and I was also, because we had Blue here for one of our marine evenings, and she also did the collection of for everything that washes up. And immediately we thought, oh, it's Chinese water bottles, so it must be a Chinese boat. And like you're saying, no, it's not. It's coming from our garbage dumps. So there's a lot to consider. It is a bit depressing. It's a hell of a lot depressing. But we have to start this conversation because we have to stop this. Is there any questions for Mark or for Chris? Mark will keep it short. Our soup is getting cold. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you. Incredible. And you're sitting on an absolute ton of data. Are you publishing this?
So, thanks for the question. So the short answer is we're going through public, articles. So we've got blogs, and we through our social media. We are looking at scientific publications, but we feel that getting the information out is more important, because the scientific publication gets lost, but it's important. We need to get that. So the oyster catcher data, trust me, this trip has changed a whole thesis on density and distribution of oyster catchers. And I think it's a food resource that's changed dramatically. But I haven't got time to chat about that. But it is. We're sitting on this data. We have to start publishing and getting it out. Yeah. So we've got 2 universities. Jonathan and I presented at the GRIN conference 10 days ago, or it's 2 weeks ago now. And we had 3 universities very interested in getting and collaborating with us. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. So, also the discussion earlier that data is
Open source,
available
yeah.
and it's open. It's not something they're going to need to do a PhD about. It's open. Could someone change it? Any other questions? One last question. Then, yes.
These little noodles are so small. Why don't they just pass through that?
It's a good question. I mean, and you know, and possibly the Nurdles would, but there's a residency time for anything before it goes through. So, you know, but they bunged up. I mean, you chat to Talia from Two Oceans and the rehab of the turtles. It takes 48 hours to evacuate all the plastic out of their gut. And that's feeding special foods. And if they, but they're so weak, you know, this is the thing. So if they're taking a huge volume, they're weak. Birds die. I mean, I've been trying to get onto Dye Island and a couple of other colonies so we can go through all the guano to see what the birds are doing and how much are they eating. Because there's examples of albatross chicks dead, and when everything decays, it's just the skeleton, a couple of feathers, and then it's just plastic where the internal organs were, or the digestive tract was in that. And there's some fantastic photographic essays on that. So, yeah, I'm sure the nurdles would go through, but it's a chemical release and it's a potential pathogenic organisms that are on them that are the big issue.
Yeah, of course, the feeling of being full, so you don't need to eat anything else. Can we end it there and, I don't know.
And go soup.
Go soup and be happy. Thank you so much to the Strandlopers. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope we can be part of your journey going forward. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. Please donate to their course and support the incredible work they are doing. Let's have soup and be happy.